Hi everyone, I'm Rita Gardner and I'm going to be doing a presentation today on perceptions and culture. I'm going to look both into web-based social cognition and cultural variances between Norway and North America. First, I want to dive into what I mean when I say web-based social cognition. I'm first going to provide a small question that Sabates asks in our textbook, and then relate to you what I first thought of when I started reading this section. Sabates asked, which cues online are used to form initial impressions of others? This is just part of what social cognition looks at. It really looks at how various social psychological phenomena are enacted in the cyber world. The example that I thought of immediately when I was reading this portion was when I was about a time when I was just entering my time at Colorado State University. I was about to head into the dorms, and I had just completed a questionnaire talking about what I enjoyed to do or what I enjoyed doing, the activities that I enjoyed, all these different things, so that they could pair me with my perfect roommate. As soon as I had found out her name, I didn't wait to meet her in person. I immediately hopped online and found her on Facebook so I could kind of understand who I was going to meet before I actually met her. So all of these impressions that the first impression that she gave me was one that I went after online. So I found her Facebook page and I looked at a few different cues, a few different things that gave me a certain impression of her. I'm going to get back to this story, but first I want to talk about this diagram that I have right in front of me. This diagram that Sabates offers in her textbook, talking about our perceptions of others and the cues that we most often use when we are trying to decide, how do we feel about this person? How do we feel about this social situation? We think about how moral they are, and that's subjective. That's something that we each have a different definition of. We also look at how competent they are, how intelligent are they? Are they able to carry on a conversation with us? Are they able to provide valuable insight? We look at how beautiful they are. And specifically, I'm going to say that this is in certain cultures. These cues are either elevated in certain cultures or kind of pushed aside. But I'd say that this one is definitely relevant to North American culture. We look at how beautiful they are, and then we also look at how warm they are. And this is definitely also culturally. This is warmth means different things in different cultures. To me, in my culture, in North American culture, I look at warmth as being something where, do they smile a lot? Do they have eye contact? Are they outgoing? Do they treat others well? And that kind of goes with the warmth, and that also goes with the moral perception I have of this person. So these factors, although they were provided for real life interactions, I believe that they also connect to the perceptions that we make online. And I'll tell you more about this story. So I looked at my roommate's Facebook page. I looked through her pictures and I looked for, is she smiling a lot? Is she around other people? Do other people like her? What is she saying about these other people? Is she kind? Is she using intelligent conversation? How is her punctuation on her comments? I looked at all of these different things and I was able to create kind of a picture of Jill before I even met her. Went on to meet her, and most of those impressions that were made from web-based knowledge were correct. And this speaks to some of the findings that Sabates talks about in her text, saying that there were some consistencies found in research about web-based social cognition versus real-life social cognition. There was some consistency between first impressions formed in response to observations made in the real world and impressions based on information found on web pages. And so this kind of goes back to that story that I had about my roommate. I was able to make certain perceptions and certain impressions based on this web-based information rather than real life information, but that was still correct. I'm going to reference this social perception diagram throughout the rest of my presentation as we head on into the cultural significance of our perception of others. I spoke a little bit about this, but really what I think of is cultural variances can warp our perceptions of others. Our perceptions of others are mostly based on cues that we choose to champion in our society. And those cues can look different in different societies. Specifically, I can think of Julien in the TED Talk that we watched this week. He spoke about a time that he made a cross-cultural judgment. He was sitting on a bench, and a stranger came and sat next to him and spoke to him. And he responded, but also thought, why is this man speaking to me? And realized, because of his time in Norway, he had been there for 5 years, that they don't speak to each other in that context. And he said laughing, it's not that people don't speak to each other, it's that socialization takes part in a much more framed and organized manner. And this is something where he made this cross-cultural judgment, this person thinking, why in the world are they talking to me? But because he was in a different place, this was considered normal, and this was a good way to relate. So as we think about these cultural variances, I'm going to dive into the cultural differences that I see between Norway and North America. The first thing that came up in my research was this term, I hope I don't butcher it, called likhet, and it means a likeness. It refers to a certain sense of non-hierarchical quality and a specific view of a likeness and sameness, which plays into ideas of roles, rights, and responsibilities in society and emphasizes similar results. It's the idea of not seeing oneself as more important than anyone else. This speaks to the likeness of the Norwegian culture versus the individuality that we hold as important in North America. I'm going to go on and talk a little bit more about this and also about the surprising details that I found in my research of Norway. This difference between the individuality that we champion and the togetherness that the Norwegians champion, we look at different things in that social perception diagram. We look at things that can elevate us as individuals, whereas in Norwegian culture, the cues that are maybe going to make a better impression would be something more along the lines of competency and moral togetherness. Are these people going to work together to a common goal, or are they going to try to elevate themselves through beautification, through things that will make them stand out above the rest? So in this research that I made, I also thought about a lot of my family members who are also from there, and my perceptions in the past was that they were cold, they were not lively, happy, outgoing, and that to me meant that they were cold individuals. They didn't like other people. They didn't want to be around other people, and that was a rash judgment that I made based on my cultural competencies and the cues that I elevated. And through my research, I saw that they're a culture of unity and togetherness. Maybe not so bubbly, not so outgoing, not so focused on elevating the individual. And what it came down to me when I was thinking about it, it says, although socially rigid, Norway is unified as a society, reliant on each other. And rigid, that can be a harsh term, but really it's just speaking of the fact that, going back to what Julien said, that socialization takes part in much more framed and organized manner. That's when they find ways to be outgoing, or they show affection towards others, which is different from North American culture. This has been a very interesting research time for me. I've really loved seeing the difference in these cultures and thinking about the way that maybe this the perceptions that we make can become a bridge to other cultures rather than a block, and make it so that we maybe write people off because of cultural differences and those cues that maybe to them are more important than the ones that we have, the perceptions that we make in our own culture.